This video will be part one of me doing these Polygel 3D chrome nails with my non-dominant hand, so please keep watching to see how. So this video will focus on prep and polygel application using my non-dominant hand. I am right-handed, so I will be using my left hand. And we are starting off with prep, just taking a cuticle pusher and gently pushing back the cuticle. And then we will take a fine grit sanding band. This is a 240 grit from Pana. This is what I always use. Seasoning that with the hand file and then gently going over the cuticle area before we dust that off with a lint-free wipe and Young Nails swipe. Then we will be taking some Young Nails brush-on glue and gluing on our tips. These are tapered square tips, so I just like to hold them down for 10 seconds and that helps them stay pretty well. Now I'm just using the magnet hack where you attach some mini magnets to your nail cutter and you use that to get the exact perfect length you want. It works great, and then you don't have to worry about measuring them to make sure they're the same length. Now we're taking that same sanding band and just slowly going over that plastic nail tip, just blending that in so it's a little bit more flush with the natural nail, being sure to only file on the plastic tip itself. You don't want to file on the nail. And then just taking a manicure brush and some rubbing alcohol to get rid of all of that dust. Now we are taking some Young Nails Protein Balm. This is a primer. I never skip this step. I think it's super important for retention. We apply that to the natural nail, just like I'm showing here, and let that air dry fully before we go in with our base gel. You always need some sort of gel base coat when you're doing polygel, so I use Madam Glam. You can use whatever you'd like of your choice, and we are applying that in a nice even layer to both the natural nail and along the nail tip as well. You can see I try to take my time here and make sure I have a nice clean cuticle and an even layer before I fully cure that. And then we keep moving on to the other nails. Now we are taking some Madam Glam gel polish. This is called Pearly. It's a really nice kind of milky pink gel polish, and we are going to be doing a sort of an ombre look. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to cover it up with chrome powder. But you can definitely do this as a technique to ombre with polygel or acrylic. So once your base gel is fully cured, you can apply your gel polish of choice in a thin layer. Make sure it's fully cured. Kind of encapsulate it with like a clear acrylic or polygel, and that's one way that you can do an ombre design. So once I use my ombre brush to feather it out a little bit, I'm just taking a lint-free wipe and cleaning up any excess gel polish. I'm fully curing it in my lamp, and then I'm going in with the second layer because this is a pretty sheer color. So again, we're focusing it on the free edge towards the bottom of the nail and then feathering it with the dry ombre brush just to kind of help it blend out a little bit more. And then we will move on to the rest of the nails. I will just say I'm not showing my nail lamp in my video because it just doesn't work very well with my filming setup at the moment. But you need to make sure you're fully curing each layer of these products before you move on to the next. So once that step is done and everything's fully cured, we are moving on to polygel. So getting my slip solution ready here with 70% isopropyl alcohol. And we are just taking some Macart clear polygel and applying a very thin layer just across the free edge. So I'm not too worried about building structure here. So you can see I'm doing a lot more of a dragging motion than I normally would. And that's because we're just trying to get a very thin layer here where we put the gel polish to make sure it's fully encapsulated. When you go in and file, you don't want to lose that gel polish color. So that's why we're encapsulating it with the clear polygel, just doing a very thin layer, and that's what the product looks like. So this is the Macart clear polygel. This product is rather sticky, so I feel like I have to kind of use more slip solution and use kind of a more rough dragging motion. It's a little bit more sticky and also kind of stiff than some of their other products. But anyways, you can see I'm basically doing that to all 5 nails here, just doing a thin layer right where that free edge starts and really just focusing on a dragging motion to make sure that gel polish is fully covered. Again, the gel polish is fully cured and we're just encapsulating it with some clear polygel here so we don't lose it when we file. And once that's done and fully cured, we will move on to kind of the more ombre part of this. So this is called Le Corail, I believe, from Macar. It's a really nice kind of sheer pink. And we will be doing our first kind of cuticle bead on all 5 nails. So you can see I'm just kind of building up that structure here and tucking it into the cuticle area. One nice thing about Polygel is it's kind of like Play-Doh, so you can kind of drag it backwards actually. If you feel like you move the product too far down, you can actually kind of use your brush in a backwards motion and drag it back up. Especially if you're building like an apex or you're trying to build structure, that's a great way to just move that product back if you feel like you pushed it too far down or if you kind of need to rework it a little bit in terms of shaping. So we will just repeat that on all 5 nails. Again, when the cuticle area, I like to use the edges of my brush to tuck it in. And here's kind of that backwards motion I was talking about. So you can see I kind of dragged my brush backwards and now I'm kind of reformulating it just because I do need more structure there because that will eventually become the apex. And then you'd pretty much just use a dragging feathering motion once you get to the bottom just to kind of blend it into that gel polish and clear polygel that we've already done. When you're working around the cuticle area, I would recommend trying to use the edges and kind of corners of your brush and kind of working on top of the product so that you can just basically kind of push it into those areas and tuck it in there without, you know, flooding the cuticle area or having to move around the product too much. So once we've done that on all 5 nails with that first kind of bead of the pink polygel and we fully cured it, we're gonna go back in with another layer of clear. I personally prefer to work in smaller beads, so that's kind of the technique you're gonna see in my videos at this point. Of course, everyone's technique can change over time, but I find working in smaller beads is better for me and it helps me kind of ensure that I'm keeping that shape as much as possible and don't have to do a ton of filing. Especially with polygel, it can be kind of hard to estimate sometimes how much product you need. So I just prefer to use smaller quantities and work my way up as needed. So we're just doing another bead of clear here where we had first put that first layer of clear just to build up a little bit more structure because that area may end up being kind of a low point and it's just a thin, simple layer and then we're just dragging off the rest of the product and fully curing it before we go in for our last bead of just one more bead of pink polygel just to finish off this application process. So I am fully curing between each bead. You definitely want to make sure your polygel is fully cured. And yeah, so this last bead again is pretty similar technique. We're placing it at the cuticle area. We're using the edges of our brush to tuck it in. And then once we get to that free edge point right here where the natural nail meets the tip, we are basically feathering it down further into the free edge over that white. And you can see it's not a perfect ombre, but really what I wanted here was kind of a transition between 2 colors for when we go in with the chrome powder. And again, for the cuticle area, you want to tilt your brush as needed. So when I'm working on the left side, I tilt my brush to the left like I'm doing here. If I'm working at the top, I basically tilt my brush kind of forward. So I'm basically just maneuvering my brush so that I can work on top of the product more and just use the edges of my brush. And then, yeah, this part's pretty easy right here where you just feather it out and that pretty much will finish up the application process for these nails. Part 2 will be posted shortly, which will focus in depth on shaping and the nail art process itself. And I will link all the products in the description that I used for in this video, like for prep and application. And then I will show a clip again of what the nails will look like ultimately. So I hope to see you in part 2. And if you have any questions or there are things you're struggling with polygel, feel free to leave it in the comments and I will respond back. And also feel free to let me know if you prefer one longer video versus 2 parts, but I think the 2 parts are kind of working better and kind of allows me to take you guys along each nail set step by step more.